Hey, all, thanks for watching. I just wanted to quickly inform you about my financial services agency, which operates in the life insurance space. So we help families with debt elimination plans and create tax-favored retirement solutions. We support small businesses, nonprofits, worker-owned co-ops, unions, and social enterprises with employee and member benefits. We offer white glove insurtech services to community banks, credit unions, financial co-ops, and CDFIs. And we provide enduring acceleration and downside capture strategies for all kinds of investors. Check out the link in the video description and enjoy the show. Back to another edition of the Mindful Marketplace here on Biz Radio US. I am your host, Joel Skene. I am super excited today to be talking with our guest, Andy Babowski. Thank you for joining us, especially if this is your first time with us. Just so you know, on this program, we talk to the entrepreneurs, advisors, industry leaders, investors, and economic experts who are not only solving a market problem to make a profit, but who are also solving a social problem to make an impact. It's where we learn how to connect our money and our businesses to our values, our community, and ourselves. Today, I will be talking with social entrepreneur, upcoming TEDx speaker, and all-around wonderful human being, Andy Babowski, to learn about what he's doing with his company, BACKRS. I got to see Andy present a few weeks back at a really fantastic, engaging, enlightening, and really inspiring presentation about his company, BACKRS. So, Andy, welcome to the show. Really glad to have you on today, my man.
Thanks for having me, Joel. Appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to get into BACKRS. I want to get into your social entrepreneurship. But first, I thought it was cool. We had a connection that we both had a background in nonprofit work and in teaching. Could you tell people a little bit about how you got started in this world?
Sure. I knew from high school that I wanted to go into education. I wasn't totally sure in what capacity, but I knew I wanted to teach initially. I started actually as a high school Spanish teacher. And then I frankly wanted to work with younger kids. I wanted to have a longer runway in terms of impact. So I moved down to teaching middle school. Now, I will say, going from 12th graders to fifth graders was no joke. I learned a lot about working with middle school students, loved it. I eventually went on to found and lead a middle school in Memphis, Tennessee, where I was the principal of that school for about 6 years. I then had the opportunity to lead a high school, actually connected to the middle school that I founded. And so had the opportunity to then be my high school principal to many of the same students that I led as their middle school principal. And then as my career progressed, I also had the opportunity to coach and manage and support many teachers and school leaders on their own journeys to leading great schools.
And you said, if I remember correctly, you said that was through Teach for America. Is that right?
Yeah, I actually started my career as a Teach for America core member. Teach for America attracts people from all different colleges and people that want to go into all types of industries, but people who are looking to have an initial impact in the public education world. I was one of the rare people that actually was planning on staying in education for a long time, but I saw Teach for America as a really cool way to go where I was needed most. So I grew up outside of Chicago, went to school in Virginia, applied to Teach for America, and got placed in Memphis, Tennessee. I'm not kidding. I didn't even know where it was on a map. Of course, I knew it was in Tennessee, but I moved there and ended up staying for about 13 years.
Yeah. Memphis is a cool town. I like it there a lot. I know I consider Teach for America ended up teaching English overseas in the Peace Corps. And yeah, it seemed like a really great opportunity for people who didn't really have necessarily know exactly what they wanted to do yet, but know that they wanted to do something good in the world and knew that they wanted to give back. What kind of, I guess, what kind of issues or what kind of challenges did you see the students that you were teaching and then eventually administering, kind of what were some of the special challenges that they were facing?
Yeah. So I was placed in a pretty traditional urban public high school. And one of the first things that I learned is that, kids are kids everywhere. They
Mhm.
have the same set of challenges, they have the same set of opportunities. And depending on where you live and depending on how you grew up, you have a different set of challenges. So many of my students, vast majority of them, qualify for free reduced price lunch. So many of them relied on the food that was provided from the cafeteria. Many of them would go on to be or would have been the first in their families to go to college. And the community that I taught in was a very economically disadvantaged neighborhood. And at the same time, my students were brilliant artists and athletes and future mathematicians and all the things. And it was that initial 2-year experience that really taught me a few things. The first is that it's kind of cliche, but I saw it to be so true. Is that potential is everywhere, but not equally distributed. Let me say it differently. Potential opportunity is everywhere, but not equally distributed, right? Potential is everywhere. And I just witnessed so many students that were doing so many of the right things, right? They were taking the honors classes. They were leading clubs and sports. They were taking the ACT or SAT a number of times, doing all the things that were promised them. Hey, if you do these things, if you show up to school, if you get good grades, if you stay out of trouble, you're going to do really well. And for some, that was the case. But for the vast majority, that wasn't the case. And in fact, there's so many other factors that can play a significant role in a young person's trajectory.
Yeah, it reminds me of, I'm forgetting the name of the author, but I remember back in college, I read a book about Chicago schools called Savage Inequalities, about kind of that disparity where, yeah, there are a lot of times the potential is there, but that it doesn't always reflect in the same opportunity for all kids. And we can get into a lot of reasons as to why that is. But I guess from your own personal experience and perspective, how did that first transition you into, because you obviously, it sounds like you were trying to do what you could within the school system to solve that problem. Was there any efforts that you made there, and anything you saw happening within the school system before we get into where you went to after that?
I mean, for sure. And schools obviously have a remarkable ability to have a huge impact on young people's lives. Of course, a high quality education surrounded by great teachers in a welcoming environment can absolutely transform young people's lives. That's true both anecdotally in working with individual students, but we also know that to be true just across the country. Schools and education can absolutely catapult young people into an amazing life of opportunity. I think a few things that I noticed working within the school. Part of first, one thing that was really influential for me in my own journey to leadership, the school that I started teaching at for the first few years, in its first year, was a stable school. It was safe. It was welcoming. There was a good sense of pride. A lot of teachers had been there for a long time. And a lot of the kids in the school were excited to be there. Between my first year there and my second year there, the principal left. And the school in year 2 was a completely different place than in year 1. Our attendance rate went way down. Students were leaving the school. It was much less safe than it was prior to that. Same teachers, same kids, same building, completely different experience. And that taught me just the power of what happens when you have a strong leader and a strong staff within a school, and what can happen if that's disrupted. And so that kind of beamed me into the power of what an individual person and the impact someone can have. I always absolutely loved being a teacher, and I still consider myself a teacher. And even when I was a principal in the first few years, I would still try and find ways to teach. But I wanted to be able to impact kids at a broader scale. And so one of the big things that I learned from this is just the impact that an individual person, whether it's in a classroom, or whether it's in a school, or whether it's in a district, can have. And so that has completely stuck with me. The second big realization that I had is that schools are expected to be all things to a young person. and to their
Mm.
family. And I think even more so as, pressures of state testing, and we are looking at performance and college access and college matriculation, there's almost this sense of responsibility and expectation that, well, if the school doesn't figure out, who can possibly figure it out? And the best analogy that I can use to describe this is if you think about a few puzzle pieces. And schools and teachers and districts are playing with these puzzle pieces all year long to try and put the pieces together to support a group of students, whether it's moving a GPA a tenth of a point, or improving advanced placement scores, or improving parent satisfaction survey numbers, or creating more clubs and sports. And we spent so much time putting together these pieces of the puzzle to put our students on a strong path forward. And one of the realizations that I had after leading schools for about a decade is that it's actually not just that 4 or 5 or 6 piece puzzle. It's like 100-piece puzzle. But when we're in schools and leading schools, we get so focused on this narrow set of inputs and outputs that, at least for me and many of those that I work with, we can lose sense of the bigger picture here. And I think that as a society, sometimes we lose sense of the bigger picture of what schools can actually accomplish. To be clear, schools can absolutely change young people's life trajectories, but I encourage us to take a few steps back and look at the broader puzzle and all the pieces really that need to be put together to ensure that way, way, way more young people are flourishing and achieving a life of opportunity.
Yeah, because I've often heard say, and I agree with this, that education really is a great equalizer. When you look at across the board, whenever there are lower levels of all the things we don't want in society, like lower levels of addiction, lower levels of crime, lower levels of family issues, lower levels of poverty, whatever it might be, across the board, when you increase education, those things tend to decrease. There's more good and less bad when it comes to more education. And I also think you're right, though, that education doesn't just mean schools. Schools can't be an entire person's education. There's lots of things that I learned that are incredibly valuable to me in school, but a lot of things that I learned incredibly valuable that I learned from individuals, like you said, or from just life experiences in the process. I really am excited to dig into what BACKRS is, because I think it's really really remarkable and insightful and kind of ingenious way to attack that problem and to help support what schools are doing. But I think with the time that we've got left in this part one of this two-part episode, I just kind of want to talk to you a little bit about the idea of you trying to solve this social problem with a business. I think for a lot of times that's kind of a new concept to people. I had on Kevin Jones, impact investor, a few weeks back, and he was talking about this idea of two-pocket thinking that people have, where it's like, well, my money, I have one pocket for my money over here where I make money, and then I have another pocket over here where I do good with that money, and those two pockets can't really ever intersect. And I think when I was in nonprofits and when I first got into business, I noticed that same sort of thinking for a lot of people, that like doing good is over here in nonprofits and in NGOs and in that sort of work, and then making money is over here in the business world, and never the two shall coexist or shall meet. Could you just kind of explain a little bit from your perspective what social enterprise is and how you kind of have gotten to where you are in this world of social enterprise? Because I'm sure there's people listening here who don't even know what that means.
Yeah. Well, we don't see the two worlds as mutually exclusive. We believe that by having the mission orientation of a nonprofit, but having the discipline of a business and the customer service orientation of a business, that we can have a dramatic impact at a much larger scale. So we made the decision to be a for-profit company in large part to be able to provide access to the capital to build something that can actually impact a lot of both young people, who we call proteges in our community, as well as a lot of adults, mentors, who we call backers in our community. And the key way that we sought to do that was to build a tech platform that can bring people together. And by and large, nonprofit philanthropic dollars typically don't go towards building things like tech platforms. And so we asked ourselves, what are some of the great aspects of mentoring that exist out there, and how can we make sure that we can scale those? And what isn't scalable? What actually can't currently reach tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of people? And our solution to that is to build a business so that we can keep our stakeholders, our young people, and our backers front in mind, deliver and delight their expectations and their experiences, while having a really big impact on them and the schools and the companies that they're a part of.
I love it. It reminds me of we had a Gilly from Ware, Asheville, and she talked about how part of the reason nonprofits even exist is that because businesses and governments aren't doing their job. And I love seeing you having this business, because not only when you're doing good with a business, you don't have to rely on grant funding so much. You don't have to rely on the restrictions that come along with government funding or anything along like that. It gives you more autonomy and ability to truly go after the goal that you have of improving this community. In part 2, we are going to get into what is BACKRS, how does it work, how is it helping people already, and what is its vision for the future. So please make sure to tune into that next week here on Biz Radio US. Also, make sure to subscribe on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, all of those platforms we're on. Subscribe, give us a review. Make sure to check out BACKRS. And make sure to tune in next week for part 2. Oh, and also make sure to listen to all the other hosts on Biz Radio US. We have tons of great entrepreneur hosts on this station, and I'm really proud to get to be a part of it. So until next time, thanks, Andy, for your time here today. And for all of you out there, take care of yourself and take care of someone else.